So, welcome to Satsang. If you were to ask yourself, what would be the greatest feeling that you could have? The greatest feeling anywhere?
Joy.
To be one with it all and
Okay.
realize that I was one with it all.
You can say joy, you can say happiness, you can say peace, you can say power, whatever it is. But the greatest feeling that embodies everything at once is the feeling of freedom. To be free. To have that feeling that you are free. And so today, this is the whole point. Because what I'm going to read to you now is one email only. And I've had several to choose from. But this particular one embodies hundreds that I've been getting recently. So I'd like to read it to you. And it's 2 pages, but it covers quite a deal of ground. Now, when I read it to you, pay close attention to the major issues that are being presented here, because we'll be covering and how freedom is the key to the key point here. Okay. Now this is what she wrote. In my experience and evolution, I've noticed the following process. When I get rid of one irrational thought, my ego finds a way to replace it with a more convincing thought. This is quite sophisticated and subtle, really, because the new irrational thought has an increasing connection with reality. It's not just in my head. This one I really feel as if it is real. Several weeks ago, and this is what defeated me the most, she's saying. Several weeks ago, I read an article about a mother bear, a captive bile bear. These are bears that are in such small cages, they can't move, and a tube is shoved into them and bile is extracted. They live like this all their lives. Their whole life is just suffering. One mother bear, when she heard her cub being tortured, got such an adrenaline rush that she broke out of her cage, slaughtered her baby to make it stop suffering, and then killed herself. Did you ever know animals could do that? She smashed her head on a wall. Anyway, I already had problems with guilt, have no real boundaries in terms of empathy, and a strong imagination, and this is preying on me greatly. Thus, my ego work is getting worse, or getting more successful. And I feel like we can't be happy, at peace and bliss in such a world as this. We're just not allowed. I just cannot find any relaxation or peace at all. To be exact, when I relax 1 second, this is what happens. It's like the relaxation is the key to remember that bear, and I become very anxious and distraught. And I have a lot of pressure apart from this, which is not helping. All this has raised the question of, now how can I relax into my true nature and bliss, if the true nature of this universe is to support such horrific suffering? What kind of universe is this? Are suffering animals previously horrible murderers, paying back a debt? Where is the balance? And most people probably can't grow from this suffering for many reasons. So it must be even harder or impossible for animals to do so. It's like I really don't believe anymore that we are love. Okay, now this was very powerful. She described it very well. She made her points clear, and it also, what is most important is that there's so many emails like it. So many, okay? And in every satsang, I repeat, because I have realized it, that we are all love, our nature is love, and it cannot be anything else. And So today I'd like to go into the freedom of that and knowing that. Okay, so but before we go further, how many of you would like to address the issues presented in that email? Anybody who likes to share? Yeah.
What came up for me when I was listening is what part of this person is observing them experiencing that?
Yeah, okay.
So,
She figures it's her ego, right? Yeah, okay.
well, no, but how can she figure it's her ego? It's something else watching the ego perform.
Okay.
So it's something grander seeing the suffering, the pain that she's experiencing.
So something grander in her is, okay. There is depth in her email, okay. There is quite a bit of seeing. But we have to go a little more. What are the issues here of this email?
The first thing that comes up for me, I don't know if it's an issue, is a deep compassion for her suffering and her identification with that suffering and with identification with all suffering. And in some ways that's a beautiful thing, because it can break her heart, but it can break it open rather than separate her. It's
Can break her heart and also break it open. That was also
Yes.
very, very beautiful. Okay. One of the things that struck me too as I was reading that about the animal is not so much suffering and what they're going through, but it's just that a mother loving her child so much, she killed her child so that it won't suffer any longer, and then killed herself. So even in animals, there is this basic love. See, we have to go deeper and to look into the dynamics of this. See, one of the things that people keep saying all the time is that, Burt, you talk about love and I don't understand love. And I'll say right away, because you're trying to understand it. How can you understand love? Can the intellect, can the mind understand love? It's not possible. Love is a feeling. It's a feeling of connection. I never knew what love was. And I played teacher, I had my own television show, I published a book. And one day I had this feeling that there's nothing for me to know. I'm a human being, a being playing the human role. And there was this feeling of connection. I can't describe it, because you can't, we try to describe it, but this feeling of connection, that everything is a unified field, everything is one, is the truth of our being, you see. But also what happens is, I repeat again, you are a human being. But now see, human being. The human is the effect. The being is the cause and effect. Now stay with me here, because this is so beautiful. So, if the human is an effect of the cause, in other words, it came from a source, the source itself is. We cannot say it is like this or it is like this or it is God, so therefore you have an entity called God. But these are words. But the source itself is. How do I know it is? Because here we are. Okay? And we came from it. But what happens is that we identify so much with the human that we forget the being. When you forget the being, which everybody does, that's why we have so many maladies and so many dysfunctions and emotional suffering. When we forget the being, automatically we develop what is called guilt. Guilt is the idea, oh, I'm missing something, there's something wrong with me, I'm not good enough. And so you don't get that. Now from guilt comes judgment. because you begin to feel this guilt as if I'm not good enough, there's something wrong with me, now I'm going to judge everything. Now petty things start bothering me. Things get in my way. Oh, I don't like this and I don't like that. And we're judging this and we're judging that. From judgment comes grievances. Grievances can last a lifetime. A grievance is, let me put it this way. If you dislike one person in this world, just one person, that person holds power over you. Because when you dislike someone, you start thinking about them. And every time you think about them, you're thinking that you're thinking against them. But it is against you that you are thinking, because every time you think about that person you dislike, you all of a sudden your energy is down about 50%. You just don't feel good. See, that's a grievance, and that's why Course in Miracles says, you know, we have to override our grievances, you know, to forgive them, because a grievance actually kills your soul. You know, I had a hypnotherapy session with a lesbian quite a few years ago, many years ago, really, and this lesbian fell in love with a married woman, and they had a terrific affair, and they were very happy together for the time being. But one day, the married woman decided to go back to her husband. Well, this lesbian came to see me, and she's so much angry, and she cannot forgive her lover for leaving her flat like that, going back to her husband. And she had this anger, and so we had a long talk, and I said, unless we can find it in your heart to forgive, you know, you are bringing on this grievance inside you. Well, anyway, she didn't forgive. Years later, I met her, and she was like an old lady. She aged so much, carrying that grievance, that judgment inside her. She couldn't forgive. So this is what we have to understand. Now, what is it called? Guilt, judgment, and grievance. You know what they're called? Fear. See, the only thing to be free from is the freedom from fear. Once fear drops, you're free. And that's what enlightenment is all about. Because your natural state has nothing to do with fear. But you see, and I like to quote the course that I did last time. It says, the opposite of love is fear, but that which is all-encompassing can have no opposite. And it's true. Unconditional love has no opposite. So, and then you might say, but where does fear come from? Fear comes from the ignorance of not knowing that you are love. So every time you don't believe you are love, and this letter proves it, your heart breaks. Because you begin to feel sorry for animals which are mistreated in this world by people who don't know who they are. You see, they're not evolved enough to have that sensitivity, that love. See? So therefore, what happens is that if we don't know we are love, automatically that very not knowing becomes a fear. But that doesn't mean the fear exists. The fear is not a reality. It is nothing more than a feeling that I am not complete. It's a feeling of separation. Okay? So that feeling of separation, we call it fear. And that fear comes into those three levels: guilt, judgment, and grievance. See? And that creates all the problems known to humanity. See? So what do we need to be free from? From the fear of separation itself. That we are a human being. That's the integration. You see? Now some people might say, I have to care for my body. Now my body is very important. Yes, it is. Of course it is. You know, in this lifetime, all you know is your body anyway. But the point is, where did the body come from? From the being that you are. You see? And we forget that. And by forgetting that, then we wonder why we are so sick, and then why things go wrong, and so on and on and on and on. But right now, we're moving into a deeper dimension, you know, and it's interesting to see as I answer emails, you know, and people are really beginning to understand that everything comes from mind. Everything comes from mind. I'm talking about universal mind, appearing as individualized mind, okay? Because all evolution is actually mind expansion, you see? You're beginning to see more and more how everything is that oneness, is that incredible intelligence. But then, once you become aware that free doesn't exist, you're free from fear, okay, then there's still one more point we have to learn. And this is something that I learned not so many years ago, is that once all fears have dropped, there has to be replaced by a love of God so great that it supersedes everything else. You see? And then when you have that love for God, that's when we get lasting joy. That's when we get lasting peace. That's when we get lasting love. You see? Because we see how everything is that one. Okay. So is there anything... Now, how did I cover what that woman wrote in what I just said? How was it covered?
So I guess she would not be judging what she's seeing in the way she is.
You see, we can't help our judgment in the beginning because it's our perception. Perception, it comes from consciousness. Okay? Now, consciousness is not a belief, but the belief is part of consciousness. Are you with me so far? Consciousness covers the whole spectrum of our mental state of individualized mind. That's what consciousness is. Consciousness is what everybody is. Okay, but there is something greater than consciousness, and it's called pure awareness. The being that you are, you see? Once you discover that, that's where the joy comes in. That's where the real living comes, you see? Because freedom takes you to that place, you know. So now you might say, well, okay, what about the animals suffering like that? Okay, and it's true. Many animals throughout the world are suffering. It hurts to see sometimes of some of the things that are happening. But can we help it? Can we change it?
No.
No. It's part of what is. It's part of what is. Now, as we evolve more as human beings, as we learn to love who we are, that very love itself automatically, there is no difference between the cat and myself. We're both living beings. You see? But how can you understand that if you don't even understand how great you are, how beautiful you are? You see what I mean?
So what you're saying is like the truth of the earth is to let it be what it is?
Yeah, to allow, because that very allowing makes you see no wrong. Now that doesn't mean that the suffering animal is not, quote, wrong, but it is happening because of some grander plan that we do not understand. How do we know that a human being at some point doesn't become an animal in order to learn certain lessons? How do we know that? Whether you call it transmigration or reincarnation, right now, I know everything is possible, that we are here to evolve, and how that evolution takes place we have no idea. So we cannot judge anything because we cannot see the grander picture. But however, that doesn't stop you from having compassion. You see, the compassion is there nonetheless because suffering is suffering. So this is where the law of cause and effect comes in. You see, this is so beautiful. Now, how do we enter the freedom of being? See, cause and effect. Cause is the being. Being is. It is not something. Okay, but it now appearing as Burt, as Jan, as Caleb. You see, so when it appears as you, then you realize I am that, really. You see? And then you begin to integrate both. And this is where the expansion and the evolution happens. But now, how do we go back so we really begin to understand? Well, the moment we begin to deal with our fears, okay? Because it's our fears that hold us back, that hold us ignorant of our true nature. But once we deal with these fears, then what we are left with is silence. That is the only answer there is. Did you know that? The only answer of life is silence. Now, what is silence? You see? Okay, right now, I'm talking, right? Do you know that you can hear me because of silence? How is that?
Noise cancellation?
No?
Without silence, we wouldn't know that there is noise.
Oh, beautiful. That is so beautiful. See, so silence is the primal, silence is the cause. From silence comes sound. From sound comes noise. So comes movement, you see? Movement. It is through movement that we see the world. How do we know that it's real? It's an appearance of consciousness. Really, it is. It is our perception, you see? And each individual, each human has his or her own perception. So how you see things, each one of us, is how we see things. You see? How we see them. We can make them wrong or we can make them right, it doesn't matter. But it is our perception. And each individual has their own different perception. But the truth is the silence itself. So we can go back into silence. What you hear are words, whether I'm speaking Chinese or Greek or Italian or English, it doesn't matter. It's made up of words. Words have a sound and a space. Sound and a space. Got it? Even as I speak. Listen. There's a space in between each sound. If there were no space between each sound as I utter it, all you hear is a dial tone. Got it? So it is the silence of being that produces the world we experience. Now you might say, how does it do it through sound? In the same way that it does it through sight. All hearing, seeing, tasting, feeling, it comes from the ability of the being to be silent. And when we get in touch with that silence, there is nothing that you cannot know. You see? There is nothing that you cannot know. So many people ask about, how does this happen and how does it happen intellectually, and trying to understand. Stop trying to understand, because you never will anyway. The only way is to, just like Einstein said, we cannot solve the problem with the same mind that created it. So we've got to go beyond the mind itself, and that is the being. See? Now when we go into being, we find everything is just being. Silent, right now. That silence is the truth of you. Silence doesn't have a beginning, and it doesn't have an end. It doesn't have time, and it doesn't have distance. You see? It is the truth. And because it is the truth, it answers everything. Everything. So let's go back now to this woman who wrote this email. And the moment I saw this email, I wrote her back and I said, I'm going to use your email because you were very expressive and it had impact, and you said exactly how you felt. But we've got to go deeper, because right now there is suffering from it, and making that suffering real. So let's discover a little bit more here. You see, I mean, even when she told me about the bears, kept caged, they cannot even move, and my goodness, yeah, there is a part of me that says, my God, how can we be like that? But the fact is, we are doing that. Now let's understand it and go deeper into it. And sharing, yeah.
I have a question just before we go. So, what is?
Yes.
And that is the nature of being, and being with that is where our freedom comes from. But our perception is part of our humanity or humanness.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can see that perceptions that we have, including the perception of separation, then if we can see ourselves as that, then even that is taken back into the isness, or what is.
Yes. See, that is the beauty.
So it is
Being
actually
aware of the perception.
the identification with the perception where the suffering lies, not in the perception itself. If we can be aware of our human being perception from that place of, if we don't identify with that, just see that as our human nature, to separate, to perceive, to allow our sense of helplessness in our projections to trigger us into that bonding with the illusion. Am I anywhere near?
Yeah. You see, once we start, the point is to deny nothing. And the moment you make something wrong, it becomes wronger. Okay?
Right.
It's inevitable. So this is why sometimes many religions do that. You see, they become very moralistic. This is wrong, you know, and their pointing of the finger is even wronger than what the person probably did. So the point I'm trying to make is, what we need to do is go back to silence every time. This is what is happening. This is what is taking place. I can only see and allow and be with what is as it is, because there is no other way.
Anything else is creating suffering.
Anything else creates more suffering. And it also goes against the very love that I am, because love in its pure natural way is unconditional.
Right. It embraces everything.
It embraces everything. So therefore, I as love, I cannot make something wrong and hate it, because that hate brings more hate. You see, and this is sometimes also religions do that. And also people with beliefs. My belief is right, therefore yours cannot be right because it doesn't agree with mine. You see, but the point of seeing the perception for what it is and not making it right or wrong, not making it different or separate, that very seeing, which is the silence of what is, brings the love awakening. You see? It brings automatically a change. Now you might say, but what will happen to animals, blah, blah, blah. Okay? The point is that life goes on as it does because of a natural cause and effect. We cannot help the things that happen, because whatever happens is part of the evolution. How do we learn other than that? You see? For example, there's a person, she doesn't forgive the hate that she has, the pain that somebody, she says, caused her. So she doesn't want to forgive this person. Okay? What happens when this person doesn't forgive her pain? That doesn't want to forgive the other person.
It's held in her.
It's held in her as her. You see? So what happens, things become worse. So when we step out of unconditional love, okay, where love takes into account everything that is. Nothing happens by chance. There are no possibilities of error, because love is intelligent. My God, love is intelligent. Here we are sitting, and the earth is hurtling through space at 20 miles per second as it rotates around the sun. But we don't feel it through because of gravity, right? Wouldn't you call that love intelligent? You know, one time I remember I was just a teenager, and I saw a woman with a big stomach, and I was so curious, you know, and I asked her, and I said, how come you're so big? And she says, I'm pregnant, I'm carrying a child. I said, there's a child in there? She says, yeah. She placed her hands against her stomach, you know, and it was quite a revelation for me. You know, I was very young. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that after I begin to see it, I begin to ask something that no pregnant woman ever asks. Who's creating the brain inside the child? That fetus, that little sperm that went into her womb became a fetus and now is creating a brain, kidneys, liver, blood circulation, heart. Who's doing it? You see? Who's doing it? We don't know. That's the love that creates all this perfection. You see? And so that is, we are embedded in this incredible love. But we cannot see this love. People never ask that question. Even pregnant women don't ask it. They take it for granted. Oh, it's a boy or a girl. Isn't it wonderful? But they don't go deep enough to see the miracle of it. You see? But when we start seeing, like, we're saying, we see our own perception, but not making it wrong. We see it all for what it is. We go deeper. And when we go deeper, we begin to unravel things we've never seen before. Because now we're using a higher than our perceptual mind. You see? So this is how we grow. This is how we evolve. She was saying how she creates one thought, and then that very thought creates another thought, more sophisticated, but it's still negative. And that point was very bright. She's very good, so she's got quite a bit of intelligence there. But she didn't go deep enough to see beyond the negative. So she ended up by saying, I don't believe in love anymore. I don't believe that we are love. You see? And she reached that conclusion. And this is what is happening. Instead of, for example, when she told me about how that animal rampaged, an adrenaline shot, killed its own child and then killed itself, what I saw was a mother's love, that she couldn't stand seeing her child suffer. That's what I saw. But if you don't go deep enough, what you see is how terrible we are to do this. Okay, we don't go deep and see the depth, the possibilities, what makes us do what we do. And this is why all behavior in the world, all of it is divided into two. You're either experiencing love or you are seeking love. If you are seeking love, we got problems. But if you're experiencing love, you are being loved. And then you begin to see that love everywhere. And the wonderful thing is that as you begin to see it everywhere, it takes you in areas you never thought was possible. You begin to see things you never saw before. You begin to understand things you never saw before, you've heard before.